Hi, I'm Allie.
And I'm Andre.
And this is
The Love is Blind podcast. Oh, that was
so good.
That was not practiced at all.
Yeah, we are just on today.
We are on fire.
We are here to discuss the last episode of season 6.
Called
The Reunion.
And the description is...
The reunion heats up as Nick and Vanessa Lachey revisit the drama from the pods to the present with this... I guess it's supposed to be like the past to the present, a pun or something. From the pods to the present with this season's participants and special guests.
Yeah, it's a long one.
It is.
It's like a feature-length movie. Hour 37 minutes.
As reunions, which is thus why we are getting this to you today and not yesterday.
Yeah, because by the time we finished this, we were sleepy.
It was sleepy. They released it in the evening.
Or at least I was.
If you like this podcast, please
rate us.
5 stars.
Subscribe.
Subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you listen. Follow us on Instagram.
Give us a lovely review on Apple Podcasts, or follow us on Instagram at Love is Blind Pod. Wait, did you just?
I just said that.
You just said that one. I heard myself saying it, and I said, yes, you did just say that. But it bears repeating.
It does bear repeating. And so we don't forget, we have decided that in April we will be releasing the Love is Blind Sweden.
Yes,
or at least our takes on it. It's been released. Netflix released it.
we had nothing to do with it.
But we're not afraid to give our thoughts regardless.
Yeah. But I wanted to also give a thank you to everyone who has already subscribed and reviewed and thumbsed up and sent us messages. And it's really exciting. We love you all.
Yeah. And a few more comments. We're loving them. We're loving the interaction. And there's going to be a lot to say about this episode. But yeah, we really, really appreciate you and the time it takes for you to give feedback. And yeah, just I'm really loving the community we're building. You know?
Yeah.
I don't mean just me and Andre. I mean like us collectively.
I also want to give a thank you to GrahamFam87, who was our latest review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for your lovely review. And for other folks who have joined our Instagram. But let's get started. We get started with Nick
and Vanessa, our favorite host. So they do the most in this episode I've ever seen them do of try to establish rapport between the two of them.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because the last season of Love is Blind Brazil involved a full-on choreographed dance routine as the intro for the reunion. And I think they felt bad. Or maybe they watched it and they were like, why don't we do something cool? We should do something cool. What if we did it in the pods? So yeah, they're in the pods. Well, at least a recreation of the pods, as far as we can tell, because ultimately the pods are they're just a warehouse somewhere. You know, you can kind of tell when they pan from the top, but it's just a warehouse with a built-up section for pods, for men, for women, and yeah, this could be anywhere. Truly,
I think you thought I was asking about why they do this big charade about the pods.
Oh, you're wondering why they're doing this big thing about we're
a solid couple.
We're a solid
fun
couple
together.
Oh, if I heard your voice across the pod, Vanessa. Yeah, I don't know. That I can't explain.
I think, not to be too in my head about it, to have too big of a head, but I think I single-handedly changed the fate of Love is Blind. No, but seriously, I've commented so many times, especially last season, I was commenting a lot on how little chemistry I thought they had. So I don't sincerely think it's like me and this podcast that they're listening to, but I wonder if they got various pieces of feedback that said, hey, you two should try to be more fun and like a different couple. Because they're putting in some work here to be fun and cool. Yeah.
And we get little glimpses of all the folks who are joining the show, including what appears to be like, oh, look, Brett and Tiffany are having an inappropriate moment where she's fixing some cabling. It's very unclear what's going on.
Right. So we're Alexa and Brennan.
Yeah. But ultimately, we're in a studio audience, which is introduced as a first look, with Vanessa and Nick seeing each other, quote unquote, for the first time. But yeah, I guess cute intro. I thought it was cute.
It was a cute intro. I'm being a bit of a hater. I don't know. I have such feelings about Nick and Vanessa. I can't help it. Just pours out.
Right. But we have a full crew on stage, and we have a
Trevor countdown.
A Trevor countdown timer immediately starts ticking from 30 minutes. But we see some folks from previous seasons, and some couples where it's a little bit unclear whether they're still together or not. Of course, on purpose to keep that excitement up, the suspense. But we begin with Amy and Johnny, who are seemingly doing great.
Really, really well. Actually, before we go over to them, I wanted to say I really appreciated seeing the past couples. It's nice to know what's going on with them. I was bummed we didn't see any Lauren and Cameron or even Amber and Barnett. From season 1. I actually had to go on Instagram after. I was like, did they break up? It looks like they're still together. So I don't know. We had Giannina from season 1. No one from season 2. Although I don't think any couples are still together from season 2. If I'm wrong about this, y'all can please correct me. But yeah, I think it was only Nick and Danielle, and I think they split up. But we have some of the other couples, and it was really nice because, it's like you see them and you have this reunion, and some seasons get the after the altar, but you wonder how folks are doing, and
right.
It's nice to see they're hanging in there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we also have some solo returns, right? We have some folks from past seasons who are just back on their own or back with a new partner who was not even on the shows in one case. So that's fun. We were really looking forward to seeing Izzy again.
Oh, I think you're
being a little sarcastic.
Just a little. Izzy is.
He's
a human being.
He is
doing his best.
Yeah.
As are we all.
Yeah.
But yeah, we start with the only couple to get married from this season. Amy and Johnny, who seem to be doing great.
Yeah, we get some cute photos and a little montage of their time together. And it's cool that their family their families are kind of connected, which tends to be a good sign in pretty much any relationship if your families get along. And it's really nice to get to see that happiness. And honestly, when Nick Lachey brings up the point that 9 out of the 11 couples that have gotten married are still together, that kind of that was surprising. That was a surprising statistic to me. I wonder, is he strictly referring to the U.S.?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that is a pretty impressive stat.
Yeah.
To have brought that many people together. And we also, as a result of his little summary, we then get a little summary of past reunions. Yeah, for everybody who got together and is still together. It's really cute to see so many of these relationships having worked out and recognizing some of the dramatic moments of their past. Like, oh my God, Zach and Bliss. Remember Zach and Bliss?
Of course I remember Zach and Bliss.
Yeah.
My favorite season, I'll say, season 4. I know a lot of people are going to say season 1 is the top because we had Lauren and Cameron. But I'm going to put it out there, controversial opinion perhaps, that I think Lauren and Cameron were the first awesome couple. I mean, Amber and Barnett from that season too. But season 4, I don't know. We had, I think, the number wise of couples and couples that I really liked.
Mm-hmm.
All of the couples that ended up together in season 4, I really liked. So it was, yeah, my favorite season.
Yeah.
Yeah. We jump over to Giannina from season 1.
And she's introducing her partner and the father of her growing baby,
Yes.
Blake. They look adorbs. Also, can I ask, what is the bottle that is in front of her? I'm assuming it's some sort of like non-alcoholic thing, but it does look as though it contains liquid gold.
Yeah, I mean, they give one to Alexa too, I think. I think it might just be water with a golden gob behind it.
You know, you are probably 100% right.
I think
I
I'm
think-
only realizing that in this moment because I'm comparing it to Alexa's. Which
Okay.
when I first saw Alexa's, I was like, what are they giving her, this golden liquid? But now that I see it next to it, I'm like, oh, it's a goblet behind it.
I genuinely, the entire time, I was like, are they drinking liquid gold?
I thought it was some other sort of liquid yellow. I'm just going to say, I was like, what? No, that can't possibly be. But yes, I believe it's just an optical illusion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad we clarified this. I had the same thought. Okay, I'm like coming off like I knew it the whole time I was watching this for the first time. I was like, what are they drinking?
Very unclear.
Yeah. But the first couple we go to is Sarah Ann and Jeremy.
Yeah. So we
There's a lot here.
We have a little Jeremy, and we have the suspense of, oh, I'm dating somebody. Oh yeah, she's here. And if we all kind of knew that it was going to be Sarah Ann. There have been several revelations on
Shade
social
being thrown
media,
left and right. Yep.
Yeah, but the revelation of her taking video in his apartment, where a lot of internet sleuths immediately started comparing, that's his nightstand, that's his wall. Which is impressive. Look, people nowadays can recognize anything in a photo. It's cool, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But she gets a little chided here for having done that. I'm sure Netflix wasn't particularly happy with her revealing information about stuff from the reunion. They then bring up Laura on Zoom.
Yes.
And we have the awkward moment where Sarah Ann and Jeremy discuss whether they should clap or not. And Jeremy is like, no. So they don't clap when Laura is introduced via Zoom. Laura's out doing some work. I do wonder whether she just straight up did not want to be there.
Yeah.
Which I would completely understand. 100% I would understand.
Yeah.
If she wouldn't want to really participate in person.
I would understand
into
that
this
too.
whole thing.
Mm-hmm. I think it was also important for her to seem important and too busy. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she did not have a good time on the show, so I can fully understand not wanting to come back.
Right. So we first address the aspect of Jeremy having been previously engaged, supposedly, potentially up until the moment he joined the show. And look, it's really difficult to listen to pretty much anything that Jeremy is saying without wondering how much of it is defensive lying or dissembling. And it just seems to be the tact that he uses for a lot of this stuff. And having seen him now, in the actual show previously lie, it is a little bit difficult to tell it apart from him just being frustrated and annoyed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they really do look very similar. And also, if the internet is to be believed, and I don't know how much of it I do believe specifically on this subject, but apparently his engagement was also broken off by a location sharing incident where his fiance at the time saw him being somewhere he wasn't supposed to or hadn't said he was. But yeah, we do have these This is the first of several moments in this reunion that are tense.
Yeah, this is a tense reunion.
Yeah.
I guess they're probably always this tense, but it's something to see.
Yeah.
I agree with you that with Jeremy, it's hard to tell. There's a part of me that just automatically assumes that he's not reliably narrating. Not just even because of his interaction with Laura, but also because we saw how he described the story to his mom.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know what happened with Sarah Ann. We can all have our theories.
Right.
We don't know what happened with Sarah Ann that night, but we know pretty much what happened between him and Laura, you know, or at least enough to know that what he was telling his mom was not really accurate, right? So
yeah.
at the very least, I suspect it's being favorably skewed for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jess sums it up with this couple at the end, where she says, hey, people have feelings, people are going to be people, but you have to understand that at the end of the day, you two could have handled this very differently.
Yes.
And
100%.
we just kind of need you to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if that was the message that was being delivered all along, that would have been easier for Sarah Ann and Jeremy to cop to. How it has been, there's like two levels of things going on. I think the level it has felt like everything is happening is you two are bad people, like an identity thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, they're like, we're not bad people. Yes, we handled this situation maybe like we shouldn't have handled, but we are not bad people. And the dialogue has been operating on that personality identity level, and it's been really contentious. Jess does this thing where she shifts it to be like, it's not about us as ultimate people. It's about the way this behavior thing, the way it was handled is different. And that, I think that's like actually a place that everybody can agree.
Yeah.
So my therapy opinion is that like you have to meet people where they're able to receive you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big thing to be feeling like I am a bad person because I fell in love with somebody. I'm just a bad person. Nobody wants to feel like a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is a lot easier to say, you know, I'm not a bad person, but this way that this went down, I wish it had been different.
Yeah.
Then you can retain feeling like a good person. You know,
Yeah.
and I think the way that Laura, AD, and everyone has come out at them has been at least felt like attacking them at a different level.
Mm-hmm. And I think to that exact point, I think one of the things that we have not seen from Jeremy is the acknowledgement, like, you know, you're mentioning the fact that he's being accused of being a bad person, but he's also not taking accountability for just the actions that he's taking. Mm-hmm. Not the generalization to the whole, but he is defensive about his actions and hasn't necessarily really apologized until I think until this reunion where he kind of throws in an apology. Mm-hmm. We do see a never before seen Sarah Ann footage apologizing to Laura, which I have to say I was really disappointed in the producers for not having included this in the original cut of that episode. Mm-hmm. It's pretty disingenuous, and it almost seems designed to make Sarah Ann look bad.
Yeah.
And that really sucks. It sucks that they essentially left all of the viewers of this show for this entire period to essentially think that Sarah Ann had come in, had this argument with AD, and then retreated with Jeremy to just go on a jet ski, and had not in any way acknowledged her own actions here that had, made Laura not feel great. And we can see that, in fact, they do have what seems to be a good dialogue, right? She takes accountability for her actions and explains it, and it seems as though Laura understands it. And, Sarah Ann is also just saying, like, I get that this maybe wasn't the best way to approach this, So I was really sad that they didn't include this in the original episode.
Yeah, I agree. Me too. It really does suggest that we're being shown a very tailored version of the truth,
Yeah.
So that's important for us all to know. I thought that several times during this reunion. I thought in general, not much was said about Chelsea. I thought, other than about her being done wrong by Trevor, but not really much about her dynamic with Jimmy. There was a lot of calling out Jimmy when we had been shown, especially the last few episodes of the show, that Jimmy was made out to be a sympathetic character. It seemed like, just don't underestimate the power of editing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think at the end of the day, these are two people that were in a really wild situation that don't seem like they could have some growing to do, but that also were made to feel like pariahs. And I'm not saying there's not reason for that, but it's sort of like when people cast you in that role, I think an act of rebellion can be to just really be in that role. So I just see I think it's a whole system that's working together here. Yeah, not just two people that did a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do in that clip also see Laura talking about, like, they kind of share this experience about Jeremy seemingly not being fully honest with them.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to see Sarah Ann kind of saying, I was wondering how much of this he is, which is then, pretty wild to then fast forward to them being together, where she seems to have previously also had a lot of doubts over his own behavior. Part of this conversation also includes, apparently, at some point in the past, Jeremy kind of said that he doesn't want to look as bad as Jimmy.
Yeah.
Which is kind of not cool.
I'm still not a Jeremy fan.
And I don't think that anything in this show is going to make us a Jeremy fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is, we get a little bit of, I wouldn't say closure on this relationship, but we do get a little bit of, I don't know, at least some explanation and context from the Sarah Ann video with Laura.
Yeah. Jimmy's comment that Jeremy says, at least I can sleep knowing I was there, or he said that after the pods. I have said before, I think in the episode where he actually is having that conversation with Laura about being with Sarah Ann, like that, I see a person who's totally defended and in shit. Like, even that comment of, I'm not the bad guy. Like, this is a person who feels like the bad guy, and I think shame gets in the way of Jeremy being able to be accountable and tell the truth a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, AD certainly doesn't buy it.
Yeah, AD.
Yeah. And ultimately we end with the two of them kind of admitting that they're fairly isolated from everybody else on the show. Sarah Ann and Jeremy kind of Jeremy less explicitly, but Sarah Ann very much saying that she is like doesn't really talk to anybody, and Jessica too kind of is saying that, like, kind of what you'd mentioned earlier, that you could have done this differently. Um, and I also have to say, and this is not the only time that this happens, but I do get this vibe that Jimmy has come in here with a little bit more of a negative attitude, and I do wonder whether some of that has been just his reaction to public commentary on the fact that he like often found himself just kind of pushed into a corner, which is the dynamic that we'd seen, and now he's kind of coming out like fists up, ready to fight, and it's unfortunate because it's not a color that looks great on him, and I think it's like you can tell that he's not like happy-go-lucky in this moment. He's not feeling great about the things that have come out from this show. Partially the stuff regarding his friend and the dynamic that he had with Chelsea.
I think in general, this reunion for me highlighted that a lot of people were really hurt by this show.
Yeah.
That's not a good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine going on like a Netflix show and then having the public hate you?
Yeah, I mean, it is an intense, not only is it an intense emotional experience for them in that 40 days, but they then have to spend a lot of time kind of in the dark waiting for this thing to come out. And then when it comes out, it's what story is being told about me, which is the truth of a lot of reality TV. But it's particularly strong when it comes to something like a show that deals specifically with a very concentrated form of relationship development, right? That you're seeing these vulnerable moments between people in a way that I think a lot of shows don't necessarily always you get to see. I think one of the reasons why I particularly enjoy Love is Blind is the amount of vulnerability that people end up sharing in those early moments in the pods, where cameras are almost not visible. When they show us those top shots of those pods, you never really see the cameras that are then being used to film the folks in the pods. They are well-hidden cameras, and people open up. They become vulnerable in ways that I haven't necessarily seen on other reality TV. And to then have that be on display and judged and pulled apart must be incredibly difficult.
I just, we're going to talk about this reunion, but just like us as people, thinking of them as people, I really hope they're all getting a lot of support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also get a little bit of information about Jeremy and Sarah Ann kind of having ups and downs, so they've had some ons and offs. Chelsea seems to say that
it's very accusatory.
Yeah,
you were broken up. Yeah,
you've been broken up. We also get the little confrontation from Nick about Sarah Ann having been in having posted a video of her in Jeremy's house, and then also confronted about her saying that this is just reality TV, sort of implying that she's just behaving in a way that is just intended for the show. I have to say, I mean, this is the first time it's happening, kind of the first time it's happening on the show. Well, I guess the first time would have been when they asked Jeremy why he kept his location on and then lied about it. It seems to me that Nick and Vanessa are actually asking some harder questions than they normally would be. I feel like in previous reunions, they've mostly lobbed some softballs at people. In this episode, I feel like they ask some tougher questions.
I
don't know
recall
if that's
that the same way.
true.
Yeah, I can't. I don't have an honest enough, like fresh enough, I guess, recollection of past reunions to say for sure. I do recall us commenting maybe for the last reunion that Nick had a pretty big zinger.
I think
Yeah.
you're right. He did have a pretty big zinger.
And in general, I don't know, the stance that they have of really trying to be caring and concerned, it just strikes me as so artificial because I really see them as trying to get the juice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're asking very pointed and specific questions, I think, for ratings. I don't know. I feel cynical. It was hard for me to watch this reunion.
Yeah.
You know, like I love doing this show, but it's hard not to see people. It's hard to see people hurting,
Yeah.
and I just see so much of that in this reunion. But
Oh man! And speaking
we
of
are here to
hurt,
talk about the people. So yeah,
Yeah.
I know. And then Trevor comes out, right?
and this was genuinely so difficult to watch. I'm sure he
Totally panicked.
panicked. I'm sure he had practiced so much what he wanted to say because of course this was going to come out. Of course it was going to come out that these messages, had made it everywhere on the internet, essentially showing that he had a relationship before coming into the pods and then kind of very quickly jumped back into that relationship right after the pods. And it's, he ultimately, there's so much shame that he's displaying here, but because he's ultimately just saying like, I'm toxic, I'm a terrible person, I don't know what to say, I don't really have anything to say about this. He seems to imply that he was fully on board with the show somehow, I don't know, resolving his behavior of bringing him to a partner who was going to be something different for him, establishing a new pattern. And it didn't happen. And then he just kind of went back to his old ways. That I think is kind of ultimately what he tells us, right? But yeah, I feel bad for him because ultimately he's coming out for a public shaming. That's genuinely the only thing that happens in his brief appearance in this reunion, and that's not great.
Why do you think he would even come on the show?
I'm sure there's probably some kind of a contractual thing to say you have to participate in the reunion. And I mean, you can tell that he wants off pretty quick. And he asks, can I just leave?
Yeah.
And I thought that it was a kindness that they let him, because otherwise this is all that it is. He comes out and they genuinely don't ask him anything other than that.
Yeah.
So yeah, didn't feel good. Not defending his behavior, but also this doesn't feel nice to just like see somebody being publicly shamed in a way that's not constructive really in any way. Like none of this is going to like help him in any way. He says himself, I need therapy. And okay, yeah, if that's probably
another person who's saying they need therapy and not in therapy.
Well, I do believe that we find out later that Clay was in therapy, has been in therapy since the show. Trevor says, I need therapy, and it does not seem as though he has been. So yeah, I thought this was a pretty unfortunate moment in this reunion to face that. Yeah.
I can imagine a scenario in which I were in a very toxic whirlwind relationship to somebody and went on the show as like an escape clause, and then after getting my heart broken, already being in an unstable place, kind of clinging to what I already knew.
Yeah, no, I can 100% see that life trajectory for him. Speaking of that, I also wanted to say, in a moment later when people kind of accuse him of taking advantage of the show just for celebrity as opposed to really buying into the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Lachey says this isn't fair to the other participants, which I guess is true. But then he says it's not fair to the audience, which I think is gross.
I know.
Because he's then saying, we wanted a spectacle that was real, and you're messing this up for us.
I know.
And I get that it's a show. But it's also, these are people's lives. And for him to say it's not fair to the audience it made me feel really crappy.
Like kind of skeezy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, hey, we wanted to see the real thing here. We're paying money to watch you do this the way we wanted it to. Well, okay, yeah, but it's his life. Like, they're talking about lifelong commitments that they're making. What, for the audience?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Again, and I'm conscious of our previous feedback that we're kinder to, or we might be biased in favor of men. So I'm trying not to be too, I'm trying to really look at that, but it's just hard not to. I don't think that what he did was okay, but I do think he needs real help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think taking him on camera and publicly shaming him is going to be helpful for any of that trauma.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We go to Clay D, which was, I think, one of the more like kind of heartbreaking moments for a different reason. Like, everything's been kind of heartbreaking so far, except for Amy and Johnny holding strong.
Mm-hmm.
But because they both still have so much love for each other, clearly, and so much hurt. So much hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that Clay seems to have learned a lot from watching himself and also from participating in this. At least early on in Clay kind of talking, AD is not really on board. You can kind of see her shaking her head and at some point trying to, like, struggling to kind of hold it together. And yeah, I can only imagine what she's going through.
Oh, yeah.
Having probably had to spend a lot of time getting over him and the hopes that she had for him. And to hear him say, "You are the love of my life and I made a mistake,"
Mm-hmm.
that is so heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what she wanted,
Mm-hmm.
you know? That is what she wanted when they went to the altar.
Mm-hmm.
I realize now, by the way, I don't know how long after the altar this reunion is taking place. Is it a year? Or we've had long, I think season 5 ended up like a year and a half.
I think probably a little less than a year based on Trevor's text messages, which were sent March 26th. So if that means there's a timeline, I'm thinking he left the show.
You are quite the sleuth.
Yeah.
You spotted the March.
I'm usually not that good.
The March 2023. Okay.
So a year-ish since then.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like AD makes a comment here when she's talking about the conversation between Clay's parents, which we all are like, yeah, that was an amazing conversation to have on TV. That's kind of a not focused on comment, but to me spoke of, it would be really hard to hear as Clay and really important for her to say, is she didn't want to be like, she didn't want to end up like Clay's mom, you know?
Well, I think what she was saying was that she doesn't want to be his mom, as in to like have to mother him. That's the way I read it.
Okay. I absolutely can see that interpretation. You might be right. The way I heard it was she also doesn't want to, if like indeed Clay is really worried about this and this is not worked out by the time they're married, there could be. I could see very much a chance that Clay would ultimately cheat because he's so convinced it's going to happen. You know, it's like that pariah thing we were talking about. Like if you're already being cast as the villain, whether externally or in your own mind,
Mm-hmm.
then at some point you're going to act like the villain, you
Yeah.
know? And Clay thinks he's shared just now. He's worried that he is ultimately a bad person. There's this heavy stuff.
Right.
He's already worried he's never going to live up to her. I could absolutely see him just like buckling to that pressure essentially and just being like, fine, I'm just going to do it. And anyway, that's how I heard 80's comment, but I think your interpretation is absolutely could be what she meant.
Yeah, honestly, she might have been working both of those angles because both of those things could be true. She doesn't want to end up in the situation as his mother. Also, she doesn't want to to fill the role of his mother, you know, who like babies him and like I don't know, has to be the one to teach him life lessons, you know, and that makes sense. Like I think
she was, yeah.
It makes sense that he should just do this growing on his own. So I think she's acknowledging the fact that, you know, she kind of understands why he said what he said, but at the same time wishes he hadn't.
Yeah.
It is interesting that we're left with this comment of, would you ever date again? And they are silent.
I could see them getting back together, but I think she's going to want him to do some more work on himself. It does seem, I could see it happening. For what it's worth, he does say he's been to therapy, but the way he said it, he's like, I did therapy. I even tried a few different therapists. I might be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But to me, that sounded like he did find a therapist, but it was very brief therapy. And someone like Clay, most of us, but definitely for what he's working on, that's not brief. You know? That happens with a lot of people. It's really hard to look at yourself.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's like once you're starting to get close to that place where you could actually be making change, the overwhelm of it becomes too much and you quit therapy. So
yeah,
I don't know. I hope that I just misinterpreted that comment and he's really in some kind of good longer term therapy because he seems like a really good person and I want him to be happy and to break that cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well,
you think we'll find out eventually they're together?
It would be nice if we did, maybe next reunion. Because Clay certainly sounds like he would want. It certainly seems that something that you said when they were at the altar, which is that Clay was going to regret his decision, has come to pass.
He was in flight mode. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that's what was happening.
There is a little bit of insight that I got into his mindset that made me understand a little bit more where he was coming from, which is he describes the coming off of being a rock star athlete.
Yeah. Yep. That was a big comment.
Yeah. And saying like, he had gotten used to being a big shot athlete who probably had a lot of girlfriends or just a lot of one night stands or what have you. And zero judgment here, but what I'm saying is I think I understand that he was trying to make a turn, maybe a purposeful turn towards monogamy and married life by joining this show. And he didn't quite fully process the fact that it would involve him genuinely becoming serious in the sense that he would have to dedicate himself to working on those things that make him insecure, that make him, that make it difficult for him to maintain a long-term relationship. And he only realized how much of that work he needed to do after going through the experience. I don't think he realized how much work he had to do on himself before going through this.
Yeah, he has some very poignant comments that nobody teaches you how to make that transition.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really important. You know, I see Clay as like he just seems like such a small boy
Yeah.
here, which I don't mean to be pejorative, but I mean like he's a tough, accomplished man, but I think he's also really scared.
Yeah.
And there's a very young part of him that's very scared. I liked that he looks up to Brett.
Yeah, that was really nice.
I wonder if they're going to interact after this.
That would be cool if they did.
Yeah, to have like a good role model. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that we should point out, because we are once again just talking about the men quite a bit,
Yeah.
but just on AD's side, the fact that she's finding herself, she's addressed this before, which is the fact that she's felt in the past that she hasn't been enough for people, right? That she has kind of done everything that she thought she needed to do in order to become, the person that these people in her life have needed her to be, and that they haven't done the same for her. And I think that she 100% deserves somebody who is willing to work on themselves. And I think that regardless of any apology that we're seeing from Clay right now, it's probably going to take her a long time to kind of fight through the hurt. Right?
Adie is a strong, intelligent, classy woman, and I don't know what her other relationships are like, but she seems to, at least with Clay, she played the role of the one providing support all the time. I commented on this a lot when we were watching the show. I think she needs someone who's really at her level, who's going to challenge her. And I would posit that, first of all, that's hard to find because she is so awesome. And it's, it's hard to find somebody who meets you. But also because that would be really terrifying to her, because she could actually get hurt then, right? I mean, I don't know. Obviously she got really hurt with Clay, but if she felt like she didn't have to be the strong one and could really open up and like actually let herself feel supported, that would be a whole different level of vulnerability too. So again, everything's a system. I really hope that she makes peace with that vulnerability, because again, as we know, she's got this story that she'll never be enough and that she can't succeed at love.
Yeah.
So it's probably really protective to find people that don't expose that level of vulnerability. But I think it's ultimately what she needs and what she can get. And yeah, I hope she's just basically everybody should go to therapy.
This is the secret underlying message
This
of our
is
podcast.
why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
No.
We do find out that she went on a date with Matthew.
A
couple of dates.
Two-ish.
Two-ish.
Two-ish dates. Yeah.
Interesting that there's a two-ish.
And dinner
Yeah.
at his place.
That he cooked.
No further details.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What are you saying?
I'm not saying no thanks.
That's true. And apparently they were on different wavelengths. He seems to be somebody who's a little bit more, I guess,
rigid.
Yeah.
Which again, I do think there's a neurodiversity thing here, and that only adds to it.
But yeah, ultimately it wasn't something that she wanted to pursue, and it seems as though Clay already was aware of it and wasn't really bothered by it. But good on her for going out and actually trying the other option, because they did have a connection while they were in the pods.
Another connection, though, where AD would have had to be in the mentor role.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So then we have a brief dip back to Amy and
and
Johnny,
Amy.
almost as if the show's like, we know you need a break.
Yeah.
Look, they're cute. They figured it out with the birth control, which, by the way, when I was like, going on Instagram looking at these people on there was a Instagram ad popped up for Amy pitching this like fertility tracker. So I'm guessing they do the fertility tracking method.
The tracking.
Even though
Yeah.
they didn't say what it is, but yeah, I'm guessing that's what I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this does begin with our section of questions
Yes.
from, I don't know if it's the audience or the internet, but...
Which, by the way, I wouldn't normally share something like that about somebody, but since she is advertising it, I'm guessing it's fair game.
Yeah, it's an advertisement. But yeah, we have a question about Jessica's daughter and how she's kind of gone through this entire experience, and yeah, it is hard to hear how she kind of had to navigate like showing parts of this show to her daughter, but probably not everything, because she didn't want her daughter probably to get excited about things that she was seeing. But it's cool that she introduced her daughter to the other women on the show, and I'm glad ultimately that her daughter was able to see her cry as a way of opening up to her. But it does bum me out that she seems to still kind of have that as kind of being, and that will be the only time she will ever see me cry. That seems to be kind of what she's implying. Because she doesn't want, like, while she out loud acknowledges that it's a good thing for her daughter to see her cry and to know that, even strong people cry, she then very actively tries to, like, stifle it in the moment as she's feeling like she's tearing up. And yeah, I genuinely hope that it opens things up more than it has.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it has. I think we know about her past. We know that she was in the foster system. We know that she has a lot of wounding. I imagine she had to be tough. So it's probably really hard for her to let that guard down. I hear her on saying it's really complicated as a mother. Like there's no rules. It's tough to know how strong to be, how vulnerable to be. I also can appreciate how being in this highly activating setting of the reunion show might not be the time I really feel like being the most vulnerable,
That's fair. That's fair.
In general, I think Jess comes across really well in this reunion.
Yeah.
Yeah. As like pretty evolved like person and pretty kind person, seems to get along with the other people on the show. Like, yeah. I mean, we do have a moment coming up in a little bit where they have Jimmy and her have a little bit of a disagreement. And okay, but even then,
we'll get there.
We'll get there.
But yeah, ultimately, you're right. I think she comes across very well, and even the moments of confrontation with Sarah Ann and Jeremy were solid. We do get next the question to Johnny and Amy about birth control and weren't condoms an option.
Yeah.
And we get a non-answer from Johnny, who says, yes, condoms are always an option, ... I will no longer address that question. And then begins to say that he didn't know anything about birth control.
Not something I had to think about as a guy.
And didn't have to think about as a guy.
Must be nice.
Which is a wild thing to say. It's a wild thing to say.
We talked in a previous episode, we talked about like, this is beyond just the two of them. It's like, this is a system that puts this on women. I do not think his comment about I didn't have to worry about it is helping him at all. It actually makes him, I think, look worse, even though I understand how from his perspective, he's trying to explain, like, I had to be educated. And of course he did, because again, it is a systems thing, but also like, I just wish it weren't, right?
Yeah. And I think as someone who personally, I tried to educate myself pretty hardcore about everything
yeah.
because I wanted to be able to take responsibility
Yeah.
for those kinds of conversations and decisions too. Uh, Hearing him say that just,
I
it
know.
annoyed me so much.
I know. It was annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an annoying comment. Yeah. And you
Um,
have done a lot. You've done more than most men,
well, thank you.
which I don't know how I feel about that probably being the case. Like, on the one hand, I feel really grateful for you. Um, on the other hand, it's like, I don't want to say that all men then are jerks then as a result of that. I just think,
No, you're right. It's society. It's a system.
yeah.
It's a,
And I hope it changes.
oh,
I hope it
100%.
changes.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it should just remain the same
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. Um,
Yeah. And we do get, speaking of Jess coming out really well, we do get a question about Jess having that conversation with Laura.
which we
About,
had commented on, right? Because we were saying like Laura's really coming in hot for Sarah Ann, but then on the flip side was encouraging Jess to do the same thing.
exactly. And first of all, we see the fact that Jessica and Chelsea seem to be on really good terms, which is, it always makes me happy to see that folks are able to like understand, what's going on and to not blame each other for the other relationships in each other's lives, But yeah, Jessica takes ownership, says that it wasn't my best moment, and takes ownership over not necessarily being the best move, Yeah.
I wonder how differently it would be if, for example, Sarah Ann had come out and said, you know what? You guys are right. If I could do it again, I would have handled it very differently. I ended up having feelings for him. The way that I handled it was hurtful. It wasn't my best moment. Do you think there would have been grace for Sarah Ann?
I think more so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, if we had even gotten to see that clip that they showed at the beginning of the reunion, if we'd seen that as part of the show, I think also by the time this reunion happened, things would have been slightly different, Because we didn't, and that's not where the dialogue was, and because that's not what the dialogue was, I'm sure that it affected the way people interacted with each other. That these folks interacted with each other. So even though Laura and Sarah Ann knew that they'd had that conversation, the fact that the conversation around the world was missing that detail will have affected the way that they interacted too. Yeah.
We move to Jimmy, who is now talking about how it felt for Chelsea to say on air that he had previously slept with his friends.
Yeah.
And people in the show had all sorts of opinions about this. Some were saying, Chelsea, it wasn't okay for you to say that on air. Some were saying it's understandable.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know. I think it's I think it's a gray area is why we're getting different. I personally agree with Clay, where it's not that she wasn't allowed to have feelings about that or feel insecurity about that. The way that she said it on camera in violation of trust was not okay. I also think that we're forgetting the larger context of their dynamic, which was, there was a lot going on for Chelsea.
Yeah.
And Chelsea in general has said on multiple occasions that because she's feeling big feelings, that should excuse her behavior. And I don't agree with that. But yeah, now we're talking. I think this one has an extra layer because it's someone else's confidence that we're betraying, or that was betrayed, I guess, you know?
Yeah. I mean, as much as I want to kind of hold space for this conversation specifically around should Chelsea have said it on camera, should she have not, the thing that my mind keeps coming back to is because this was an issue of trust, because this was an issue that Jimmy clearly had made clear he didn't want out in public, and he makes it clear in the moment too, and afterwards he in subsequent conversations. It sucks that Netflix and the producers of the show chose to put it in their show.
Yes, that
right?
is also super true.
So again, when we're talking about the edit, ultimately, if they knew that this is something that was going to affect somebody who was tangentially in the show, like Jimmy's friend was showing up to support him, to be a supportive friend, them doing that is what's really gross, because it's gonna affect her life. She didn't want that information there, you know, and it sucks because it's also, by the sound of it, has affected his relationship with his two friends.
I think, first of all, that might explain why Jimmy's so upset on this show, but I think things like that are why I can't get on board with Nick and Vanessa, because they purport to be caring and they're just like representing, you know, the audience, like fighting the good fight. And I'm like, you realize that you are the ones responsible for this narrative. And you realize that you are the ones responsible for making these people hurt on this stage. Yeah. So I just, it's not, listen, they're in their role. They're hosts. They're trying to get ratings. But at least then own that. And don't then try to be the good guys. Yeah. Yeah. Like you're like, you know, they might be fine people, but in this role, they're not the good guys. So I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about that. In general, I think, if I'm recalling right, there's kind of only one comment said about how Chelsea was, which is AD saying, we didn't realize all that was going on behind closed doors, and it's a very different picture than what we got of Chelsea. Yeah. And then it was sort of like not followed up on, right? Yeah. So I don't know what kind of producer choice that was. Maybe it was because Chelsea had been so spotlighted in the show that they wanted to give her a break. I don't know. But it was noticeable to me that really not much was said.
No, you're right. AD mentions that we don't see this side of you. You're hiding this side of you in front of the people that care about you and in front of the larger world. And we've only seen she only saw this side as a result of seeing the edit that Netflix put together. And you know, Chelsea is nodding and smiling along with this, kind of like, "Yep, you're totally right. That's what I do. I hide things. I don't show my insecurities to people."
In her dissociation,
and quite literally, the next thing that is said is Vanessa Lachey saying, "Thank you guys for sharing." Moving right along. And it's not the only time that this has happened on this, where we don't genuinely. I guess I'm kind of going back on my earlier comment that they're asking the hard questions, Nick and Vanessa. They don't necessarily push, and I'm not saying that in a situation like this they should have pushed Chelsea, but
why does she get a pass, right? Like, why is there not an inquiry about, like, have you had a chance to look at your video? What do you think? Even something like that.
Yeah, or is this something that's been difficult? To present her with some compassion over that. I think it ultimately comes across as like, okay, yeah, this is awkward. I don't really know how to address this. She has insecurities. And in some ways kind of proves, I mean, I hate to say it, but it kind of proves Chelsea's point of like, why would I show my insecurities? People don't want to talk about it. People don't want to see this part of me. People want to move on. I say that as somebody who has struggled in the past with kind of opening up about my insecurities in front of some strangers, in front of people, and then having them turn away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then not receiving support
Yeah.
for it. And it makes you kind of not want to share those insecurities anymore. It makes you want to put a facade up. So yeah, it really is unfortunate, because addressing this kind of stuff rather than just putting up a facade would help her lead a more genuine life, you know? And so much of what we saw in the breakdown between Jimmy and Chelsea was a result of these insecurities. Insecurities that not only does she seem that she isn't necessarily addressing directly, but that she's actively putting on a facade. Like, I've seen so much stuff online, so much sort of Chelsea content where she's trying to laugh off, for example, the comments about like, oh, you don't look like Megan Fox, etc.
That must hurt.
Yeah,
so
and it must
badly.
hurt. Yeah. And I understand the impulse that she's having, which is that you shouldn't let the bullies know that they hurt you, right? Like that's I think that what she's trying to like stay strong, but in a way that I feel like doesn't allow her to fully address what's going on.
So I think, if I'm hearing you right, what's coming up for you is like she's not given the opportunity to speak for herself, which could be helpful.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think we could really hear from her, like, how was it to see yourself, and what, tell us more, and kind of like what was given to Clay. For me, it's hard to tell if that's what's going, or if she wanted that and wasn't given it, or if the producers decided to not show it, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But, we're calling insecurities. Yeah, it's like a very particular attachment wounding. And that kind of, as with much of our attachment wounding, it really shows up with the people that we are forming the closest attachments to. So it would be a common thing for something like what Chelsea is working with, which, as an aside, people have written in asking if I have diagnostic thoughts. I don't want to go down that road with Chelsea, but I hear you. Anyway, I think that attachment wounding comes out closer to those she is closest to. So it makes a lot of sense that her friends and the people on the show that she saw, like, they're not experiencing that. Jimmy, who's getting really close to her, is experiencing that,
Right.
But yeah, I imagine there has been some reflection. I remember I saw her post on Instagram that, like, insecure, like, well, look at this dress or something, but it's so hard to tell what is really just being put out there. Like you said, that facade. And if the wound is that underneath I'm really unlovable, that only is going to make her go into that even more so, that false self. Yeah, we don't really get too much in general of what it was like for either Jimmy or Chelsea to see their dynamic on camera.
Yeah.
It's an interesting omission, given that it took up so much time on the actual show.
Yeah, I think it took up the most time of any of the couples.
And Jimmy seems to have very negative feelings towards the show.
I mean, I can understand where he's coming from, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we do, as far as I can tell, it's just stuff that has continued to ripple, right? So
Mm-hmm.
because we then move into the conversation about Jessica, and
Yeah.
we
You betrayed me with this article. Mm-hmm.
right. I mean, we start off by talking about them kind of meeting up at that barbecue and how they were able to kind of connect and feel friendly, and how he thought that that she was attractive when he first saw
Mm-hmm.
her on Instagram. But then we do get to this moment where they talk about how Jimmy threw her under the bus
Mm-hmm.
by saying that she left the room on their last date in like 10 minutes. Um, they have this kind of just argument in front of
Mm-hmm.
everybody, which ultimately, I will say, culminates with them showing the receipts, quote unquote,
Yeah.
which prove her point, I believe,
Yeah, I
which is
believe
that
so. Yeah.
their date was a long date, and then we immediately move on again, and we don't really get them talking about how this makes them feel. The fact that Jimmy isn't really held accountable for having then exaggerated and lied
Yeah.
about that experience.
The complete lack of a response to that clip made me wonder if they actually showed it in the reunion or if they just edited it in after.
That is possible. Yeah.
Because it was like so surprising that there would just be no response to that.
Yeah. They really truly don't talk about it at all.
Mm-hmm. But
Uh,
it's like reminiscent of the cuties incident in season 3 where they show the clip and it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, Jimmy does not look good. He was so bottling everything up on the show that it seems like it's all now erupted.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like maybe in this interview, I don't know what his motivation was for the interview. Maybe he was just very activated, but I don't think Jess is the person to take it out on,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
We do then briefly mention the Megan Fox comparison. And look, ultimately I mentioned just a few minutes ago that I wish Chelsea would kind of acknowledge the fact that the comments online from people have been hurtful, but
Mm-hmm.
all in all, the fact that she is able to just stay positive and at least outwardly say, like, I feel good about how I'm doing. Yeah, she's doing okay from that perspective. I do think that, her interactions with Jimmy at least were showing us that there's a little bit more than what she's showing on the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's got like that, you know, claiming to be calm, but her eyes are fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do hope
She's really activated.
I do hope that it's something that she can work on, because she is gorgeous whether she looks like Megan Fox or not.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
And again, the show titrates us out to not Brett and Tiffany, Zach and Bliss's baby shower.
Yeah, they're just wanting for us to like
It's
try
getting
to
too real for you. Let's go
stay
to
a
this
little bit
baby
positive.
shower. Can we get Amy and Johnny back in there? Yeah, these are some of the couples that we love.
Yeah.
No, I know.
And then we have the other couple of couples who are in the audience right now. And it's really cool to see that they're doing pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Alexa is also pregnant.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, then we move to Brittany and Kenneth.
Yeah. Which is another situation where I don't necessarily know whether we've gotten the full scoop.
Yeah.
in other sources seem to have indicated that when they broke up, they actually broke up before the camera started rolling, and that the camera started rolling after the breakup had actually happened. They don't seem to acknowledge that at all. And instead, we get this sort of excuse from Kenneth to say, "Hey, I'm a principal and I was just catching up with everybody." He mildly acknowledges that maybe he was spending too much time on his phone.
Right. It's not a big acknowledgement.
It's not, very mildly. But that continues to be a really, like, thinking back on that scene continues to be a really difficult aspect of this past season, and how kind of callous it seems for Kenneth to have walked away. He claims that he called Clay feeling broken up, like as in like emotionally distraught by that situation. And it's true, people experience that pain in the moment in very, very different ways. So it's not necessarily great for us to judge whether he felt personally hurt by that particular experience just based on what we saw on camera. But I do think that something that is 100% true, at least based on what we saw, is that he didn't seem to care about how Brittany was feeling in that moment. That he doesn't. Or
I would say he was so overwhelmed by his own hurt that he didn't have capacity to care about how she was feeling.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a distinction to me. It's not like he thought about how she was feeling and decided not to care.
Yeah, that's a good distinction.
But yeah, sorry I interrupted you.
No, not at all. I think that's a really good point, but it is, I guess, beyond us saying that he didn't seem fazed by it, which I can, understand his point of view that people react to trauma differently. Yeah, I was just, I think, more upset than anything, and this maybe even calls back to, to my own past experiences in my life, but just seeing somebody being hurt and then a person who says that they love them just not showing any care in that moment, not reaching out and saying, "Yeah,
so hurtful.
How are you?"
Yeah,
like I can see that you're hurting. How are you doing?
Yeah, I think he just got flooded. I don't think it makes it okay. Again. Well, in general, I think owning what we're coming in with doesn't mean that we're not then responsible for working on ourselves, right? So I don't think it makes it okay in the sense that that's the end of the story, but
yeah, I
think it can have us offer him some compassion. They seem to be in a kind of like quasi friend, quasi dating thing,
Yeah. I mean, they seem to be in touch quite a bit, but yeah, we don't get much more acknowledgement about what was happening between the two of them at the time.
We do have a quick shot to Matt and Colleen, who Colleen says, "You're going to get through it," which, I mean, like, she on her reunion show looked so frozen and scared. And I think a lot of people, myself included, were just worried about her because Matt had such a temper. And I think I don't mean to be, but I think that is minimizing it the way I just described it. And yeah, we were all very worried about Colleen, and she subsequently said she wasn't afraid of Matt. It was just a lot to be on the reunion show. So her words here saying "you're going to get through it" are understood. Yeah. She was kind of raked over the coals in her season 2.
Yeah.
Oh.
And one of the last little bits that we get is a bit that we actually kind of already talked about, which is Matthew. Specifically, his sort of playing both sides by telling two different women about how he's really into wanting to get their father's permission to marry them.
More than that, saying the same thing to both of them.
Yeah. And and we find out at that point about the date that AD and Matt went on, and how, you know, he got a little cooking done.
Some cooking.
But ultimately,
Rice and chicken.
They don't have that spark.
Yeah. He wasn't on the reunion. I kind of thought they'd bring him on the reunion, but
he says he did decline.
Oh yeah, he did decline. Okay.
Which I do wonder. Just, you know, based again on what I've read, it does sound as though there's potentially a financial implication to refusing to be on parts of the show. And I do wonder. I wondered that about last season too, about Uche, that if maybe the folks who are a little bit better off financially can just afford to say no.
Yeah, maybe. Might be.
That
I wonder
just
also
say,
if if you're one of the engaged couples, is there that consequence, you know? Because obviously not everybody in the pods makes it to the reunion. So then it closes with, of course, a pitch for Perfect Match.
Yes. Yeah. With Micah and Izzy and Jess all on it. Which I love the implication at first that Micah and Izzy are dating.
Which they might be. Maybe they met on Perfect Match.
Exactly, right? Oh my God.
You'll have to watch to find out.
You know what's silly? I hadn't even realized, and you're 100% right, they probably have already filmed that season.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a wild thing to think about.
Yep.
And that they might, in fact, be together at this point, but they can't show it because
they seem pretty chummy. Yeah.
That show has not yet premiered.
So.
Right.
And that, I believe, I don't think we're missing anything else. Izzy comments about his credit's been fixed. And notably, when he was on his own reunion, he was like, I'm definitely in a relationship. And then he released at least one video about it. And they seem to have broken up.
Possibly. Well, yes, if he's on a different dating show.
Mm-hmm. I feel for the guy, you know, he's trying to come off as so like tough and unfazed and whatever. But again, it's like a Clay syndrome, you know, all I can see is like a young child in there who's hurting, you know, I don't know. Yeah. It's my vision. It's my therapist vision.
And we do get a little bit of glimpse from what am I saying? We do get some glimpses of some of the other couples. We also get a promotion for Love is Wine.
We also get them saying, watching the show is like therapy, and I hate it when people do things like that.
You hate it when people compare other things to therapy?
Yes.
Other things that are not therapy?
Yeah, it's not like, you know, I watched like House and it was like going to the doctor.
Yeah. Well,
it's more than just listening.
That is more than just listening.
Oh, it's my own pet peeve.
Yeah.
We work hard, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, I couldn't end this episode without making a weird Andre observation.
Yeah. Of course.
I will say, first of all, we do get this weird glimpse where it seems as though Clay has put a Gatorade in the microwave, where in fact he had just put some pasta in, and we're seeing a reflection of the Gatorade bottle. It's the weirdest thing for them to end on. But for those of you watching with subtitles, because we're one of those subtitles homes.
We're a subtitles household.
Whoever is doing the subtitles has been keeping a track of people in the audience who are making exclamations, because it will count up. It will say like woman 20. Oh no. Or like woman 30 saying,
there's also Chelsea 1 and Chelsea 2.
There's Chelsea 1 and Chelsea 2. I missed that.
Because there's Chelsea and Kwame. And then there's Chelsea and Chelsea and Jimmy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's worth doing. I like the subtitles.
The numbering of the speakers was wonderful. And I did wonder whether they just had somebody actually genuinely say, well, that person sounds like a different person than the person who said that other comment in the background. But yeah, towards the end, there's a woman 30 who speaks.
Well, that is it for us for this. We will catch you in April for Love is Blind Sweden. I've already watched the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, please, 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 we want your thoughts on this reunion. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Do you
Yeah.
have a totally different perspective? We want to hear it.
Definitely. And if you listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, remember to rate us 5 stars. It really makes a difference. It means that other people might listen to the show, and it encourages us to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, your reviews really make us feel appreciated, and it is one of the only ways that we get value out of this.
If a podcast is
podcast.
recorded in a forest and nobody is around to like it,
Did it even
did it
happen?
happen? And no, the answer is no.
No.
No, we really, yeah. I mean, we are really enjoying doing this,
Yeah.
but it is also really fun to interact with you all.
If you all only knew the amount of podcast episodes Allie and I have recorded but never released.
It's true.
Yeah,
It's true.
it is.
And with that cliffhanger,
Bye, everyone.
see you in April.
See you in April.